Good morning, Magic. I'm Gavin Verhey from Wizards of the Coast, and welcome to Valentine's Day week. Mark, is that a thing? I'm being told it's a thing. Anyway, the Suddenly Smitten Super Drop contains the Valentine's Day 2021 Secret Lair, and one of the cards in that Secret Lair with awesome new artwork is Boros Charm. And with this Boros Charm here, and it being Valentine's Day week apparently, I started thinking about the history of charms, and what is it exactly? Well, let me tell you all about it today. Our story begins, and I can't believe I'm saying this, 25 years ago with the design of Mirage. The design team for Mirage had a lot of small effects that they liked, but there was a problem. A lot of them weren't worth a full mana to cast. Things like destroy target wall or target creature phases out for the turn. Not really worth that mana investment. But they had an idea. What if instead of putting one effect on one spell, they could put multiple effects on the same spell? And thus, the charms were born. This ended up working out particularly well because the Mirage design team was also the team that came up with the idea for Booster Draft, which as we all know now would go on to be a huge success. And having a lot of these very tiny effects around to put on your cards that you can main deck sometimes was really, really helpful. Why 3 effects? Well, the answer is very, very simple. 2 was just too few options to be playable, and 4 didn't fit on a card. The charms worked out so great that they did another 5 in the next set, Visions. This had a bunch more small trinkety effects that really were not even worth a full card for just 1 mana. The charms would go on to become fan favorites. I mean, who doesn't like options? And so 5 years later, when Planeshift was being designed, they were doing a multicolor block and they thought, what if instead of doing 1 color charms, we did a cycle of 5 multicolor charms? And so the 5 Planeshift charms, sometimes called the Dragon charms, were created. The idea here is that they would be 3 color charms with 3 different modes, and each color would represent a different mode on the card. And this really blazed the trail for a lot of the charms that would come later on. The power level for these in design was all over the place. And in fact, I went to go look up Dargoz's charm, and at one point, one of the modes for this charm was Shatterstorm. That's a little bit more than a charm, I'd say. Anyway, the design team had opened up the very rich vein of charms. And so the next year with Onslaught, they did 5 more charms. And these are maybe the 5 weirdest charms. They're all a single mana to cast, and they have a bunch of small effects on them. And they're tribal because Onslaught's tribal, kind of. The white one, Soldiers, yes, that starts off great. And the green one, Beasts, okay. The black one can destroy or raise dead a cleric, so that kind of works. The blue one changes the creature type, so that kind of hits. And then the red one deals damage to wizards. That's like anti-tribal. Because I was wondering what in the world was going on with Fever Charm, I looked it up. And apparently the +2/+0 mode was originally giving all of your goblins +1/+0, but was changed because affecting 2 different tribes was weird. Still a little strange to keep the one that damages wizards, but hey, at least that solves that mystery. The next time we would see charms is 5 years later, in 2007 with Planar Chaos. And like most things in Time Spiral Block, these charms are a little weird. Each one did things that the color doesn't normally do. For example, the green one, Evolution Charm, gave creatures flying, and the blue one, Piracy Charm, was a color-shifted version of Funeral Charm, which gives things minus toughness. One other particularly interesting thing about the Planar Chaos charms is that of all the charm cycles in Magic, these are the only ones to have generic mana in their mana cost. And to make it even stranger, some of them cost 1 and some of them cost 2. What a weird cycle. I take it back, Onslaught. These are the strangest ones. I also went back to go look at the developer comments for these cards. And apropos of nothing, I found this one on Dawn Charm, which brought a huge smile to my face. I think this deserves a Hall of Fame nomination for developer comments. And while we're here, there's something more interesting than just memes to talk about. It's Devin Lowe's comment here about the core, mantle, and crust. The way these charms were constructed is they had 3 abilities. The first being from the core, or the core of that color's color pie, something they can do all the time. The second came from the mantle of that charm's color pie, something the color didn't do very often, but could in some cases. And finally, the third ability was the crust. This was an ability that was not currently in color pie, but made philosophical sense for what the color was doing, and strictly flavorfully, the color could do it. This was meant to represent what could theoretically happen someday. And it was this core, mantle, and especially crust philosophy that the color breaks on these charms came from. It's kind of funny, either by coincidence or intention, that game design kind of gets into this pattern of not doing them for a while, then doing them immediately again. And that's exactly what happened here, because just a year later with Shards of Alara, we saw 5 more charms. These charms very much take a page out of the Plane Shift Charms playbook. Each charm has 3 modes, and each of the 3 modes corresponds to one of the 3 colors. But the big innovation here is that each of the charms is named after its respective shard, something we will start to see a lot more later on with factionalized charms. Now, as history seems to be showing us, there's a gap before we see the next group of charms. 4 years later in Return to Ravnica block, and this time they're named after the guilds. Now, the way these charms are constructed is they, once again, have 3 modes. There's a mode that one color does, a mode that another color does, and then something they can both do together. Like many things Ravnica has done, I view these as the pinnacle of charm design. They have great modes, they're just the right amount of flexible, they showed up in Standard, they showed up a little bit in Eternal formats, they show up in Commander, they're still reprinted in sets today. I love these charms. Although 2 years later, we get another pretty great cycle of charms. These are the Khans of Tarkir charms, and for the first time ever, they are 3-color wedge charms, each one named after one of the Khans of Tarkir clans. And they end up being pretty popular, showing up in Standard, and to this day, still making a lot of Commander decks. One pretty interesting thing about the Khans of Tarkir charms is they're the first charms to use this brand new modal template with bullet points. And this actually came from something I was working on. At the time, I was working on Kaijudo, another game we were making, and we started making modal cards in that game, and the editor decided to template them using bullet points. And I saw them and thought, wait, this is awesome, Magic should totally use this. So I ran into Aaron Forsyth's office with a few mock-ups of cards like Cryptic Command and Bow of Nylea, and it was clear this was way easier to read. Aaron loved it, kept it in mind, and by the time we got to Khans of Tarkir, we were ready to put it on Magic cards. That was all the way back in 2014, and we actually haven't gotten a new cycle of charms since then. We've had a few fun one-ups. For example, in Modern Horizons 1, we saw Archmage's Charm, which hints at the idea of monocolor 3-mana charms. We've had Umezawa's Charm, which was kind of just a fun reference. And then the last printed charm was actually in Mystery Booster with Evil Boros Charm. And then, of course, there's the honorary charm, Charming Prince from Throne of Eldraine, which has 3 different modal effects on a creature. Cute, right? So, will we see charms again? The answer is certainly yes. The only question is when, and only time will tell. And speaking of time, I wonder which charms made it into Time Spiral Remastered. So now I'd love to know from you, what is your favorite cycle of charms in Magic's history? Let me know in the comments down below. I'll talk with you again on Wednesday. And in the meantime, may you have a very charming time playing Magic. You got this. The year is 1998, and Urza Saga is about to come out, the beginning of perhaps the most broken block in all of Magic's history. Now, Mark Rosewater designed this block as an enchantment-based block, and some of those cards actually still made it through. But as most of you know, Urza's block ended up being known for its very powerful broken artifacts.